Casey was abandoned by her parents when she was 16, leaving her with only a TV and $100 for Christmas. She survived, built a life from scratch, but one day they were back, breaking into her home to take everything. Can Casey protect her world from those who betrayed her? Casey Ross grew up in a sleek, modern house on the edge of Seattle, where the gray skies seemed to mirror the coldness inside her home. Her parents, Emma and Logan, weren't your typical mom and dad. They were wine-obsessed entrepreneurs, always chasing the next big deal for their organic vineyard startup, Ross Vine Company. To them, Casey was more of an afterthought than a daughter, a cute little accessory when she was small, but less interesting as she grew into a quiet, awkward teenager who didn't fit their polished Instagram aesthetic. By the time Casey hit 16, she learned to fend for herself. Her mornings started with the hum of the TV, her only real companion, blaring reruns of old sitcoms while she scarfed down cereal alone. Emma and Logan were usually gone before dawn, off to some winery meeting or a fancy tasting event in downtown Seattle. They'd breeze back late, reeking of Merlot and Cabernet, tossing her a distracted, "How was school?" before disappearing into their office to crunch numbers or argue about marketing strategies. Casey stopped expecting more. She'd just shrug and retreat to her room, where she'd built a tiny world of her own with books and a beat-up laptop she'd saved up for with birthday cash. Holidays were the worst. Christmas at the Ross house wasn't about family, it was about money. When Casey was 10, she begged for a real tree, dreaming of that pine-scented magic she'd seen on TV. Emma rolled her eyes and said, "Too messy." Logan tossed her a crisp $100 bill and muttered, "Buy whatever you want, kid." So Casey did. She dragged home a cheap plastic tree from the corner store, its fake needles already shedding, and spent hours stringing it with dollar store lights. It was hers, at least, something they couldn't take away. Every year after that, she'd haul it out of the closet, set it up alone, and sit by its dim glow, pretending she wasn't invisible. Her parents didn't even notice her efforts. They were too busy building their empire, one bottle at a time. Ross Vine Company was their real baby. Casey was just the kid they'd accidentally had along the way. Relatives later told her Emma and Logan never planned to have kids. "You were a surprise," her Aunt Kate would say with a sad smile years later. They thought they'd be child-free forever. Knowing that stung, but it made sense. Casey could feel it in the way they looked through her, not at her, as if she were a blurry figure in the background of their perfect vineyard photo shoots. School wasn't much better. Casey wasn't the popular type, too shy, too plain, with her thrift store jeans and messy brown hair. Teachers liked her, though. She was smart, the kind of kid who aced tests without bragging about it. But friends? Those were harder to come by. Most of her classmates lived in tighter-knit families, the kind that showed up for parent-teacher nights or cheered at soccer games. Casey's parents never did. She'd forge their signatures on permission slips and tell herself it didn't matter. Then came the day everything cracked open. It was a rainy Tuesday in October, just after Casey turned 17. She trudged home from school, her sneakers soaked through, expecting the usual empty house. But something felt off the second she stepped inside. The air was too still. No hum of the espresso machine Emma obsessed over, no clack of Logan's keyboard. She called out, "Mom? Dad?" Her voice echoed back unanswered. A quick peek into their office confirmed it. Laptops gone, files cleared out, even the fancy wine decanter missing from the shelf. Panic crept up her spine. On the kitchen counter, she found it, a note scribbled in Logan's jagged handwriting. "Case, we're heading to California. Business expansion. You're old enough now. Rent's paid through the month. Good luck." Next to it sat a crumpled $50 and a spare key. That was it. No goodbye, no explanation, just a casual "see ya," like she was a roommate they'd outgrown. Casey stood there, rain dripping from her hair onto the linoleum, staring at the words until they blurred. She wasn't just invisible anymore, she was abandoned. For a minute, she thought about calling someone, anyone. But who? Her grandparents lived across the country, and she barely knew them. Emma and Logan had always kept the family at arm's length, saying they were too judgmental. Her friends weren't close enough to burden with this. So Casey did what she always did. She figured it out alone. She grabbed the 50, locked the door, and turned on the TV, letting the laugh track drown out the ache in her chest. Tomorrow, she'd deal with tomorrow. But deep down, she knew this was the start of something bigger, something she'd have to face without them. Casey Ross woke up the morning after her parents ditched her with a pounding headache and a sinking realization she was on her own. The Seattle rain battered the windows of the empty house, a fitting soundtrack to the chaos in her head. 17, No job, no plan, just a $50 bill and a note that might as well have said, "Figure it out, kid." She sat at the kitchen counter, staring at the crumpled cash, and did the math. Rent was paid through October, but that gave her less than 3 weeks before the landlord came knocking. Utilities? Food? She had nothing. Her parents had drained her life like they drained their wine bottles, fast and without a second thought. The first few days were a blur of panic and pride. Casey didn't want to beg, not her teachers, not her classmates, not even the distant relatives she barely remembered. She'd seen enough TV dramas to know how that ended, pitying looks and empty promises. Instead, she raided the pantry, living off stale crackers and the last of her cereal, and started scouring the neighborhood for any gig that didn't ask too many questions. A corner store hired her to stock shelves for minimum wage, no resume needed. It wasn't much, $10 an hour, a few shifts a week, but it kept her from starving. She'd trudge home in the dark, counting coins for the bus, telling herself this was temporary. It had to be. Then came her 18th birthday, a milestone she'd once imagined celebrating with cake and friends. Instead, it arrived with a knock on the door and a 30-day eviction notice from the landlord. Emma and Logan hadn't just left, they'd stopped paying rent altogether, leaving Casey to face the fallout. "You're an adult now," the note had said, and the universe seemed to agree. With her measly savings and a backpack full of clothes, she moved into a dingy studio apartment in Tacoma, 30 miles south of Seattle. The place was a dump, peeling paint, a leaky faucet, and a faint smell of mildew, but it was hers, for $100 a month, utilities barely included. She hauled her plastic Christmas tree along, setting it up in the corner like a stubborn middle finger to her past. Life in Tacoma was a grind. Casey juggled 2 jobs now, mornings at a coffee shop, evenings at a big box store, ringing up groceries for people who didn't look twice at her. Sleep became a luxury, snatched in 4-hour chunks between shifts. She'd catch herself nodding off on the bus, her head jerking up as the driver called her stop. College? That dream faded fast. There was no time, no money, no one to guide her. Her coworkers were nice enough, but they had their own lives, kids, bills, plans. Casey was just the quiet girl with tired eyes, fading into the background again. The breaking point hit 6 months later. The store manager, a petty tyrant with a clipboard, fired her over a spilled carton of milk she didn't even drop. "You're too slow," he barked, ignoring her protests. She walked out with $37 in her pocket and no backup plan. The coffee shop gig couldn't cover rent alone, and Tacoma's job market wasn't exactly booming. Bills piled up, unopened on the wobbly kitchen table. One night, staring at a final utility shut-off notice, Casey broke. She slid down the wall, knees to her chest, and let the tears come. "I can't do this," she whispered to the empty room. For the first time, she wondered if her parents were right. She wasn't cut out for this. But then, a lifeline. Her phone buzzed on the floor, an unknown number lighting up the screen. She almost ignored it, probably a bill collector, but something made her pick up. "Casey? It's Kate, your dad's sister." The voice was warm, unfamiliar, cutting through the static of her despair. Casey froze. "Aunt Kate?" She vaguely remembered a loud laugh and a bright smile from a family photo, but Emma and Logan had always brushed off their relatives. "Too nosy," they'd said. "They don't get us." Now, here was Kate, talking fast. "I heard what happened. Your folks took off to California, left you high and dry. That's garbage. Where are you?" Casey stammered through her story, the words spilling out: eviction, Tacoma, the jobs, the loneliness. Kate didn't hesitate. "Pack your stuff. I'm in Montana, got a spare room and a decent couch. You're not staying in that hole." "Montana?" Casey's mind raced. She'd never been past Oregon, never met Kate beyond a blurry memory. But what did she have to lose? The next day, she sold her last decent possession, a cracked laptop, for bus fare, stuffed her clothes and that plastic tree into a duffel bag, and boarded a Greyhound headed east. The ride was long, bumpy, the scenery shifting from rainy forests to wide-open plains under a big, indifferent sky. When she stepped off in Missoula, Kate was waiting, a sturdy woman in her 40s with a messy bun and a pickup truck. She pulled Casey into a hug that smelled like coffee and hay, no questions asked. "Your parents are idiots," Kate said, tossing Casey's bag in the truck bed. "But you're not. Let's get you sorted." For the first time in months, Casey felt something like hope flicker in her chest. Montana was a blank slate, a chance to breathe. She didn't know what came next: school, a job, a fight. But she knew one thing: she wasn't sinking anymore. She was swimming. Casey Ross stepped into her new life in Missoula, Montana, like someone waking from a long, bad dream. The air was crisp, the mountains loomed like silent guardians, and Aunt Kate's little ranch house felt like a fortress against the chaos she'd left behind. It wasn't fancy, peeling paint on the porch, a creaky staircase, a kitchen that smelled faintly of bacon and old wood, but it was warm. Kate didn't hover or pry. She just handed Casey a chipped mug of coffee and said, "Your family. We figure it out from here." For the first time in years, Casey didn't feel like she had to prove herself to belong. Kate was a force of nature, blunt, practical, and fiercely independent. She ran a small landscaping business, mowing lawns and planting flower beds for Missoula's retirees, and she didn't take nonsense from anyone. "Your dad's a jackass," she told Casey over dinner that first night, stabbing a fork into her mashed potatoes. "Always was. Emma just made him worse." Casey nodded, unsure how to feel about this woman who seemed to know her parents better than she did. Kate didn't push, though. She gave Casey space to breathe, something her parents never had. Days turned into weeks, and Casey found her footing. Kate got her a part-time gig helping with the landscaping crew, hauling mulch, trimming hedges, nothing glamorous, but it paid. She enrolled in the local community college, too, thanks to Kate co-signing a small student loan. Business administration classes weren't thrilling, but they were practical, a ticket to something stable. Casey threw herself into it, studying late under a flickering desk lamp, determined not to waste this shot. She even started smiling again, cracking jokes with Kate over takeout pizza, letting the weight of Tacoma and Seattle slip off her shoulders. By 2022, at 21, she'd earned an associate's degree and landed a job as a logistics assistant at a trucking company. Decent pay, benefits, a desk of her own. Kate beamed like a proud mom when Casey showed her the first paycheck. The real win came when Kate offered her the house. "I'm thinking Arizona," Kate said one evening, nursing a beer on the porch. "Winters here are hell on my joints." "You want it?" "50 grand. Yours outright." It was a steal. The place was worth triple that, even with its quirks. Casey scraped together her savings, took out a tiny mortgage, and signed the papers. The day she got the keys, she stood in the living room, her plastic Christmas tree still leaning in the corner, and thought, "This is mine. They can't take this." For once, she felt like she'd built something solid, something her parents' shadow couldn't touch. That peace lasted until the summer of 2023. Casey had been on the road for a week, coordinating freight shipments across Idaho, when she pulled into her driveway late one Friday night. Her headlights caught a glint of white, a beat-up van parked crookedly on her lawn, its side plastered with a faded logo she hadn't seen in years, Ross Vine Company. Her stomach dropped. She killed the engine, grabbed her phone, and crept closer, heart hammering. The front door was ajar, a sliver of light spilling out. She dialed 911, finger hovering over call, when she heard it, Logan's voice, loud and slurred, barking orders inside. "Put it over there, Em. She won't care." Casey pushed the door open and froze. Emma and Logan stood in her living room like they owned it, surrounded by cardboard boxes and a couple of ratty suitcases. Logan, grayer and paunchier than she remembered, held a half-empty wine bottle. Emma, her hair dyed a brassy blonde, was arranging chipped wine glasses on Casey's coffee table. They turned, saw her, and grinned, like this was some happy reunion. "Casey," Emma chirped, brushing her hands on her jeans. "Surprise. We're back." "Back." Casey's voice cracked. "What the hell are you doing in my house?" Logan chuckled, swirling his wine. "Oh, come on, kid. Business tanked in California. Bad loans, worse luck. We figured you'd have room. Family sticks together, right?" Casey's jaw tightened. Family? These were the people who ditched her at 17, who'd left her to scrape by while they chased their vineyard dreams. Now here they were, stinking of desperation and cheap Merlot, acting like squatters with a birthright. She stepped forward, fist clenched. "This isn't your house. I bought it. Get out." Emma's smile faltered, but Logan just shrugged. "Legally, we've been here a bit," he said, smirking. "Squatters' rights and all that. You can't just kick us out." Casey's mind raced. He was lying, he had to be, but the casual way he said it chilled her. They'd planned this. She glanced at the boxes, the keys dangling from Emma's pocket, the way they'd already made themselves at home. "I'm calling the cops," she snapped, pulling out her phone. "Go ahead," Logan said, leaning back on her couch. "We'll tell them we've been here months. Our word against yours." Emma nodded, playing the wounded mother. "We just need help, Case." Don't be cruel. Cruel? The word hit like a slap. Casey stormed to her bedroom, slammed the door, and locked it, her breath ragged. She sank onto the bed, staring at the phone. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Her parents weren't just back. They were a threat, and this time, she'd fight to keep what was hers. Casey Ross sat on her bed in the Missoula house she'd fought so hard to call her own, the door locked against the invaders in her living room. Her parents, Emma and Logan, had turned her sanctuary into their crash pad, their voices seeping through the walls like a bad memory. Logan's smug squatter's rights taunt echoed in her head, and Emma's fake tears only fueled the fire in her chest. They'd been gone for years, left her to rot, and now they thought they could waltz back in? Not this time. Casey grabbed her phone, hand shaking, and called the one person she knew would have her back. Aunt Kate. Kate picked up on the second ring, her voice sharp with Montana grit. Casey? What's wrong? Words tumbled out: van, logo, boxes, lies. Kate didn't flinch. Those leeches, she spat. Stay put. I'm calling my lawyer friend in Missoula. Don't let him push you around. Casey nodded, even though Kate couldn't see, and hung up. She cracked the door, peering out. Logan sprawled on her couch, wine bottle in hand, while Emma rifled through her kitchen cabinets like she owned them. We're family, Emma had said. Family didn't break in and squat. The cops arrived 20 minutes later, 2 officers in crisp uniforms knocking hard enough to rattle the windows. Casey opened the door, her story ready, but Logan beat her to it. Officers, thank God, he said, standing with a rehearsed slump. Our daughter's trying to kick us out. We've been living here for months of hard times, you know? She's just mad we hit a rough patch. Emma chimed in, eyes glistening. We had a verbal agreement. She's our little girl. Casey's stomach churned. Lies, smooth and practiced, delivered with the charm they'd perfected selling overpriced Pinot. She stepped forward, voice steady. They're lying. I've been on the road for work. They broke in this week. This is my house. I bought it from my aunt. She thrust the deed at the taller cop, a guy with a buzz cut and skeptical eyes. He scanned it, then frowned at Logan. You got proof you've been here? Logan dangled a set of keys, her spare keys, snatched from the hook by the door, and Emma waved a DMV printout. We updated our address last week, she said sweetly. Mail's on the way. Casey's jaw dropped. They'd planned this down to the details. The cops exchanged a look. Looks like a civil matter, Buzzcut said, handing back the deed. No clear break-in, no violence. You'll need a court eviction. Casey's heart sank as they left, their cruiser crunching gravel outside. Logan smirked, raising his bottle in a mock toast. Told ya, kid. Emma patted her arm, all crocodile tears. We'll work it out. Casey yanked away, retreating to her room. She wasn't losing this, not to them. Kate's lawyer friend, a wiry guy named Dan with a no-nonsense vibe, showed up the next day. He took one look at the mess, boxes, wine stains, Emma rearranging Casey's furniture, and shook his head. They're banking on delaying you, he said, scribbling notes. We file for eviction now. Get neighbors to vouch they just showed up. Casey nodded, desperate but determined. Dan warned her it'd take time, courts were slow, especially post-2020 backlog, but she had the deed, the truth. She just had to hold the line. Living with them was hell. Logan drove a delivery truck 6 days a week, griping about it constantly, while Emma took a sales gig at a local boutique, strutting around like she ran Casey's house. They paid nothing, no rent, no bills beyond a measly $100 they tossed her way with a sneer. Be grateful, Logan said once, counting it out like he was doing her a favor. They rearranged her living room, demanded the master bedroom, acted like she owed them for existing. 18 years we raised you, Emma snapped when Casey pushed back. Raised her? They'd barely fed her. Then came the twist. One night, eavesdropping through the vent, Casey heard them on the phone, gloating. Yeah, Mom's dad kicked it, Emma said, voice smug. Left me $300,000. We're rebuilding Ross Vine and Callie better this time. Casey's blood ran cold. Her maternal grandfather, some rich recluse she'd never met, had died, and Emma had inherited a fortune. They weren't broke. They were using her house as a free pit stop while they schemed their comeback. She grabbed her phone, recorded the tail end, Logan laughing about suckering the kid, and sent it to Dan. Proof they weren't desperate, just greedy. Court day came 4 months later, early 2024. Casey stood before a judge, a stern woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, and laid it all out. Deed, neighbors' statements, the recording. Dan argued they trespassed, not squatted, and had no claim. Emma cried on cue, Logan blustered about family rights, but the judge wasn't buying it. No lease, no permission, no residency, she ruled, banging her gavel. 30 days to vacate, or sheriff's orders. Casey exhaled, relief flooding her. She'd won. Outside, Emma glared, mascara streaking. You're heartless, kicking out your own blood. Logan loomed, fists tight, but Emma pulled him back. She'll regret this, he muttered as they stormed off. Casey didn't flinch. They'd stolen enough, her childhood, her peace. Not her home. She watched them go, the weight lifting, knowing the final battle was hers. But 30 days was a long time, and she braced herself for their last stand. Casey Ross stood in her Missoula living room, counting down the 30 days she'd won in court. The judge's ruling Emma and Logan had to vacate by March 2nd, 2024, felt like a lifeline, but it came with a catch. Her parents weren't going quietly. They'd spent 4 months treating her house like their personal squat, and now, with the clock ticking, they doubled down. Casey marked each day with a red X on a calendar tacked to the wall, a silent warning they couldn't miss. She wasn't backing down, not after everything they'd taken. The first week was a war of wills. Logan sulked, slamming doors and leaving wine rings on her coffee table, while Emma played the guilt card hard. We're your parents, she'd say, rearranging Casey's shelves like she still had a say. You owe us respect. Casey shot back, respect's earned, not demanded. You lost that when you ditched me. Emma's eyes narrowed, but she'd slink off, muttering about ungrateful kids. Casey held firm, sleeping with her bedroom door locked, her phone charged for emergencies. She learned their game, push until she broke. But this time, she wasn't the scared teenager they'd abandoned. By week 2, they shifted tactics. Logan started leaving sob story notes, lost the business, case, we're broke, while Emma cornered her with teary pleas. We just need a little longer, she'd sniff, clutching a tissue. Casey saw through it. She'd heard their gloating about the $300,000 inheritance from Emma's dad, money they were funneling into a new Ross Vine company in California. They weren't desperate. They were freeloaders banking on her giving in. She didn't. You've got 20 days, she'd say, pointing at the calendar. Find a place. Kate checked in daily from Arizona, where she'd moved for the warmer weather. Don't let him guilt you, she warned over FaceTime, her voice crackling with static. They're snakes. Call the sheriff if they stall. Casey nodded, grateful for the backup. Kate even offered to fly back, but Casey waved her off. I've got this, she said, and she meant it. She'd built this life, degree, job, home, without them. They wouldn't steal it now. The final days were chaos. Logan and Emma dragged their feet, pretending they'd forgotten to apartment hunt until the last minute. On February 28th, with 4 days left, Casey caught them hauling her guest room dresser to their van. That's mine, she snapped, blocking the door. Logan shrugged. We slept on it for months, finders keepers. Casey called Dan, the lawyer, who sent a cease and desist letter overnight. They grumbled but left the furniture, settling for their boxes and a thrift store mattress they'd scrounged. March 2nd dawned cold and clear. Casey woke to the sound of the van's engine sputtering. She peeked out, Logan hefting the last suitcase, Emma tossing a trash bag in the back. They didn't knock or say goodbye. As they climbed in, Casey stepped outside, screwdriver in hand, and started removing the front door's old lock. Logan glanced back, his face darkening, but Emma tugged his sleeve. The van peeled out, kicking up gravel, and Casey exhaled, a long, shaky breath of freedom. She fitted the new lock, turned the key, and smiled. They were gone. Life after was quiet at first. Casey scrubbed the house top to bottom, erasing every trace of them. Wine stains, cigarette ash, the sour smell of their entitlement. She sold the place a month later for $150,000, triple what she'd paid Kate, and moved to Phoenix. The desert heat was a welcome change from Montana winters and that tint she'd once shivered in. Her logistics job transferred her to a bigger office, better pay, a corner desk, a view of cacti instead of snow. She bought a small condo, installed security cameras just in case, and settled into a life that felt like hers alone. Word came through Kate a year later, in 2025. Emma and Logan's new Ross Vine company had crashed. Tax evasion, shady loans, the details were fuzzy, but the outcome wasn't. They'd lost the inheritance, the business, everything, and were back to square one, squabbling in a rundown Cali rental. Casey didn't gloat. She didn't need to. Justice had found them without her lifting a finger. Karma's a slow burn, Kate laughed over the phone. Casey agreed, sipping coffee on her balcony, the sun warming her face. She thought about her parents sometimes, those cold Cedal, Emma and Logan, wondering if they'd ever change. But they were footnotes now, a chapter closed. Casey focused forward. She started dating a coworker, a quiet guy who loved hiking, and made time for friends who felt like family. I won't be them, she'd tell herself, vowing to be the parent she'd never had if that day came. Phoenix was her fresh start, her victory, not revenge, but resilience. She'd risen from their ashes, and that was enough.